the best player available in a rookie mock draft with a full group of real people following along with us. We're going to be putting that up on the screen just in a little bit, and we're going to be doing all that here on the Dynasty After Party with Club Fantasy just right now. Here we are, Joel. We're back. We're better than ever.
How's it going? Got a full group of real people. That's awesome.
I know. It's an important distinguisher, because a mock draft without real people and a mock draft with real people, it's a dramatically different thing. So hopefully we're providing something here on the show that, we can't do on our own, where we do all of us do our solo mock drafts, but try and do them with 12 people can be a hard thing to do. So, that's what we got here. We got some lovely ladies and gentlemen in our mock draft coming up soon. But what a week it's been. What a week. We've finally, I feel like we've gotten over the hump of free agency, and we are finally going 2 feet deep into NFL draft season. Are you excited for that?
Yeah. It's always an exciting time of year. It always happens way too late, right? There's no reason for it to happen at the end of April. Why can't we have it in the middle of April or, the third week of April like it used to be? But yeah, the NFL's got to milk everything for everything it can. So yeah, it is what it is. So.
And we're going to be
very excited
to feed into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They know they got us by the you-know-what.
Yeah. Good to have Gator, who is in our mock draft, I believe, in our chat here as usual. Good to see you. But, Joel, I say, since we're going to have plenty to talk about, let's just jump right into the mock. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's do it. So here it is up on the screen. As you can see, we're doing, basically just 4 flexes. So you're taking the best players available. And as I get rid of all the notification stuff so we don't hear any dings, let's go and begin the draft. Starting off with BroCal44. But first off for you, Joel, as I start this draft, what is something that you're looking at in terms of right now? We are both back end of the draft. You're in the middle. I'm in the back end. How does that kind of affect the way you're approaching this year's group?
So yeah, I kind of put myself in that position. Just say I'm a team that just missed the playoffs. What am I looking to do with this draft? You're probably not going to get the quarterbacks. You may get a straggler depending on how things go. Did we set this up as tight end premium? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm taking a look here, but I don't even think it was technically an option, honestly, with how Sleeper has it. But we can imagine it if you wanted it to be.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Bowers goes in a non-tight end premium. But yeah, I think like the 5 top spots are kind of set, right? You're gonna have 3 quarterbacks and the top 2 receivers. Then it gets interesting. So we'll start at the 106 and see, position myself at the 106 and see where things go from there. Feels like a pivot point right there.
Yeah, no, it feels very interesting to see whether someone slips through the tier or whether you get someone at 6. 6 is a very much like a real life spot for number 6 in the NFL draft. It's a spot of trading out potentially if your guy doesn't fall there. But for myself, sitting down at the 109 because I took too long to, choose a slot. There wasn't any thinking like you had behind that. I might have chosen a later slot of that contender that you're missing the first tier. I mean, we've talked about a lot where, we want to get inside that top 8. And at 9, you're right outside. So I'm really curious to see how this draft's going to fall for me because it's something that I'm uncomfortable with, and that's what you should be doing these mock drafts for, is when you're in early April. Get rid of that. Or I just said early April. But, man, we got Jayden Daniels going 101. Do you think that's CPU that we should fix, or do you think we should change that up?
Yeah, let's change that real quick because I don't think that's going to happen.
I apologize, Smitty. I do. But let's just fix that real quick. Although the auto draft is going to redo it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure how the auto draft didn't pick that up, but
there we go. Thank you, auto draft. I'm back on track. Smitty on the clock, and there goes Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison Jr., not a quarterback, and now we're starting to get it going here. There's no doubt in your mind that Caleb Williams is the 101, I imagine, even in especially in Superflex. But I know we've talked on the show before about the cause for debate of Marvin Harrison versus Caleb Williams. Is there still a argument to be had to have Marvin Harrison at 101?
Yeah, I think he's the best prospect in the draft. And if you have teams like my teams tend to be, which is I already have, like I'm already set a quarterback, then I'm going to take Marvin Harrison at 101 or see if I can trade out and get a haul for that pick. But yeah, I think it should definitely be between Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison at the 101.
Yeah, it has to be one of those two, right? Which is interesting because I think you will see other leagues though where you see Jayden Daniels going number 2 because of that rushing upside, right? Everyone, it's going to be so attractive to so many people.
Yeah, 2 is interesting. I think you could, if you need a quarterback, then it's definitely viable to take a Jayden Daniels there or Drake May if you just kind of like a safer prospect. But yeah, I think 2 is kind of a pivot point, or well, actually one or 2 is a pivot point depending on how it falls, whether it's Caleb or Marv at 1 or 2, and then do you take a second quarterback there? Do you go with the wide receiver who's kind of the best prospect in the class, or do you need the quarterback? I don't think these quarterbacks beyond Caleb are near the prospects that Harrison is, but you've got the value in this is a super flex draft. You've got the inherent value of a quarterback, and if teams need a quarterback, you probably have to go get one because this is seen as a fairly good quarterback class.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before on this show of even hoarding quarterbacks to an extent of even if you don't need a quarterback, if the quarterback is the best value on the board, you take him because that trade value is going to be exponentially valuable. It's very difficult to trade for a quarterback like that. Now, I will say that Josh didn't mention that we should have left Jayden Daniels at number 1 just because someone will fall in love with the rushing upside. And I don't totally disagree when we think about it because wild stuff happens in mocks all the time.
Sure.
But it is interesting to see here, even though I believe we had the auto there, which he said he had the Q set, so Malik Neighbors was the right pick there for Bills Mafia fam. But interesting to see that, CPU won Jayden Daniels number 1 overall. We have Jayden Daniels still sliding here to the 5th, with 2 receivers going off in a super flex draft. And I think that speaks to the value of these or the strengths of these 2 prospects because I love both of them, as you know.
Yeah, Neighbors is close to Harrison as an elite prospect, right? He's probably the best prospect. When we've talked about this before, he's probably the best prospect since Jamar Chase. But like I think Marvin Harrison is the best prospect since Calvin Johnson. So, but again, you're splitting hairs. And again, what style of receiver do you want? You can make a case that Neighbors may not be a better fit on the team that he goes to. So they're 1A and 1B. I prefer Harrison, but you can certainly make an argument that Neighbors deserves to be right with him.
As do I. And I don't know if you saw the Chris Sims graphic. I don't know if you had that. Yeah. Did you? Did you see the pleasure of seeing Marvin Harrison, tier 2 receiver?
It's a choice.
It's a choice. It is a Chris Sims choice. What a guy. Gator has a good question here that I think is important to talk about, though, is if we're trading the 1-on-1, what is the value there? As we see Brock Bowers going off the board there and Joel. Oh my goodness, Roma Dunze. But either way, if you're trading the 1-on-1, what is your value? What's the value on that?
I think he should be valued about where, say, Kyler Murray, Anthony Richardson would be valued as a trade chip, because I think he's going to be a similar type of quarterback. There may be differing opinions on where those guys should be valued, but I have them fairly close. But yeah, I think he should be kind of in that group. I would take like any of the tier 2 quarterbacks, Burrow, Herbert, Lamar, Stroud. I would take any of those guys ahead of the 101 pretty easily. So I don't think you're getting those guys for the 101, but if you want to move down into that second tier guys, that's where you should value the 101 at.
We got a
next move, I
good
guess that's not the word
yeah.
here.
We got a good point here to switch it from 2 minutes to 60 seconds. We're gonna switch to 60 seconds here in this draft, which I probably should have done originally. But you raise a good point there of I think people will overpay for the 101. And I think that's what I want to look for if I have the 101. If I'm giving up Caleb Williams, I do want an overpay. Because right now I believe on Keep Trade Cut, he's going off the board as a QB9. And that's to me only gonna rise, to be honest. So at QB9 in a Superflex startup, we're thinking that's early second of a startup pick, high first, or sorry, back end first. It's somewhere between
About that,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, because honestly, no one's taking a running back over Caleb Williams. No one's taking. I don't think a tight end's going off the board before Caleb Williams. Maybe not in premium. No.
No, not
So
Superflex.
yeah, so that chances are it's the ninth pick off the board right now, with maybe a couple of receivers sprinkled in, and a Justin Jefferson, a Jamar Chase. So if we're talking about that, that falls all the way there. But shout out
You're on
Buff
the
getting
clock,
that
by the
good
way.
value on Jayden Daniels there as I go to make my pick now.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that happening, right? I think there's enough question about like landing spot is going to matter here, and again, we're going to do this again after the draft, and then we're going to compare how landing spot and draft capital affect where these picks go. Like I took Odunze ahead of Daniels. I think that's I'm very concerned about Daniels holding up physically in the NFL, and I'm concerned about how his game kind of translates. I have zero concerns about Rome Odunze being a very good borderline elite wide receiver. So I think this is something that I think everybody's kind of going nuts that Daniels lasted until the 107. I think that's something that could happen, and it could, whether it's Daniels or May, that could happen in your rookie drafts.
Yeah, and it's going to be a very interesting discussion to see who goes where. I could easily see the May and Daniels flipped, like you were saying. We could see Daniels going as high as the 101 potentially, in some crazy formats, but or he's on the top 3 type of guy. And then you could also see May slip because some people might think of him as more of that pocket passer, and people don't always love pocket passer fantasy because of the allure of the Lamar Jacksons, Justin Fields of the groups, and Jim Rubin adding that Jayden Daniels could easily go second, and that's very possible.
Like we said when we were talking about Marvin Harrison, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up being the number 2 overall. And like I have a draft where I have the 103, and I fully expect Harrison to fall to the 103 because neither of the team ahead of me have a full quarterback room. So yeah, I could see it's perfectly reasonable to expect to get like a Marv at 3, assuming the teams ahead of you are kind of broken down that way.
Yeah, and it speaks to the value of being in that top tier, right? Of wherever you perceive that top tier of ending. I felt, and I'll talk briefly about my Keon Coleman pick, just because I don't love it. I don't love seeing all the guys ahead of me going above it. Like I significantly missed a tier, and I could have went with a JJ McCarthy that is now being heavily linked to a Minnesota trade up, or maybe the Raiders do something nuts. But it seems very likely that JJ McCarthy is getting top 10 draft capital, but I'm not the biggest fan, and frankly, I like Keon Coleman more. I think he's going to get day 1, high day 2 value, but I mean, getting right there, JJ McCarthy falling to the 111 in Superflex startup, that's pretty good value. That's pretty good value, regardless of what you think of him.
Yeah, again, based on where we expect him to go, that seems like a good value. Again, this is why we're going to do this and see how draft capital and landing spot affect this, because everything kind of points to McCarthy ending up with the Vikings, right? That's where we think this is heading. What if it doesn't? I mean, there's plenty of scenarios where it just, the Vikings trade up ahead of him and get a Drake May or something like that. And then McCarthy kind of falls down the board and goes to Denver or Oakland. I'm still in Oakland Raider. Vegas or something like that. Is he as attractive a prospect in those spots instead of in Minnesota with Jefferson and Addison? Probably not. So yeah, that affect his draft cap. So it's gonna be very interesting. Like we expect that to happen, but you never know. Strange things happen. Like this is misinformation season, right? It's called that for a reason. So This could all be just a bunch of possible. It's possible the Vikings just make their 2 picks and don't make a trade. Right?
I would give.
Maybe they love Sam Darnold.
You know this. Yeah, you know this. I would give anything for them to just use those 2 picks wherever the hell they want on the roster, except for quarterback. If they let Sam Darnold unleash with this roster, this is a 12-win team. This is a 12-win team for them, man. I'll be so happy if Sam Darnold gets his run. But Jim also adding that JJ is being mocked higher and higher, and that is the trend. That is the trend of him being a very high riser at this point. But like Joel said, it is misinformation season, so it's kind of hard to pick apart what's real and what's not. But what is real is that the Vikings traded up to get number 23 to, in theory, package 23 and 11 together to get a quarterback. That is tangible evidence that Minnesota feels they can get their quarterback. Because, listen, we think that, we say it's possible they could just make their picks. But, when we see teams trade up before the draft for a pick without any players involved, it's typically because they have a plan in mind to move that pick to get something more.
Yeah, I mean, typically, but I think they got a pretty good deal on that pick, right?
Oh, they did.
A few seconds for a first is a really good deal. So it's possible you just want to kind of build out your roster. And listen, they are going to have to, Kirk Cousins was never really an option for them because they're going to have to pay Justin Jefferson as the highest paid non-quarterback in the league.
Yes.
So that makes it really hard to carry a high-priced veteran quarterback. So
which is why Kirk walked.
Exactly. That's why they didn't resign. It was never really realistic that they were going to sign him. So you can either get, you can trade up assets to go get a quarterback, or you can just kind of take a guy that you think is serviceable, which they may think of Sam Darnold, and then just use those picks to build up around him and just kind of build the infrastructure of your team. That's a valid way of building your team.
And hey, Joe, listen, Sam Darnold's he's still 26 years old. Listen, it's to me, if I'm Minnesota, and this is because I'm a diehard Darnold guy, but why not write it out? If it's going to cost you everything in, an arm, a leg, and a piece of your heart to go get a quarterback like JJ McCarthy, as I go to make my pick here, to me, that's just brutal. It's just a lot to give up for someone that I'm not totally, I guess that's probably because I'm just not totally sold on, but this is a remarkable supporting cast in Minnesota right now. The offensive line's not terrible. They're still kind of missing their quarterback, but
they're upper half at least. I mean, they're probably top 12.
Okay. Josh, you need to just let me have this because I can't ever. He went to the Jets and then Carolina. Those are the 2 most defunct organizations in the last 10 years, and the situation was horrible. It's possible. That's all I'm saying. It's possible. It's possible. Let the man ride. Give him a chance. Kevin O'Connell's a good coach. But also, Josh mentioning something really important that I want to bring up was that we do these mock drafts every Saturday morning with what's called Mock It Like It's Hot, and Monday nights as well at 10 p.m. Eastern, with the occasional Sunday mocks like we do here on this show. So I know a couple people like Thomas and Brandon in the chat there were disappointed that they couldn't make this mock. There will be more. The beautiful thing about what we were complaining about before, about the draft still being a month away, we get to have all that time to do mock drafts. The show is here with Club Fantasy, specifically designed to do that. So huge way to stay in touch and seeing all that stuff. Follow on social media. That's where we put this out here. Twitter, at Club Fantasy FFL. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe on YouTube. Hopefully you're watching right now on YouTube, because ultimately it's kind of a better viewing experience. The comments come through for us. We can pull them up. So I know a lot of people are watching on Twitter right now, but feel free to switch over to YouTube. Hit that subscribe. It'll be a huge help to us. And that's something I really want to echo, because we obviously want to get you guys in as many mocks as possible. And it's a lot more fun when we get the people that have been following the show anyway. So,
and you can check out the Mocking with the Stars. Is that what the Gator calls it? On Monday nights with Gator and Chris B. And get with Gator J on Twitter. There's a mock draft group chat on Sleeper that you can join, and he'd be happy to get you in. Then you get first dibs on this is where you can get, if you want to get into these mocks, that's the first place that they're going to be posted. So that's the best way to get in.
And listen, I mean, joining a mock with Gator J is inarguably the best thing you could possibly do with your with your Monday night, Sunday morning, any day of the week, any time of the week, I would say, Joel. So
Exactly.
that's
Gator and
something.
Chris do a great job. They had Howard Bender on last week,
Oh yeah.
Andrew Cooper the week before. So they're getting some big names to do these mocks. So good stuff there.
Yeah, love those names. Follow them, been following them for years. But either way, we do have an interesting pick there with Joe Milton going off the board in the third round. Still plenty of receivers, a few running backs that people like. The people we're starting to get to that point of the draft here in the third round where you have the cult following groups, right? Where everyone picks their favorites. The lesser of the Sam Darnold loves of mine. We all pick out the day 3
Sure.
guys, the late day 2 guys that we are putting our flags down. It was for us last year. It was Jaden Reed type of guys, and Rashee Rice was one of those. But Joe Milton right now, third round. We had an all draft of Malachi Courtley and Xavier Leggett. Is it Leggett? Do you know? Leggett. My bad. Going at the back of the second round there. It's all people that I think people are very polarized on.
Yeah, and this is why we want to do this now and do it after the draft, because these are the kind of guys who are going to get affected by draft capital, by landing spot. Because we don't know, right? Xavier Leggett could be, if somebody falls in love with him, he could be a second round. Like, we didn't expect Jayden Reed to have top 50 draft capital last year, but that's where he went. Somebody like Leggett, if he gets second round draft cap, like, he probably jumps into the first round of rookie mocks if he gets that kind of draft capital. I'm on the board here. So yeah, those are, those are the guys we like now. They're, your flavor of receiver, your flavor of running back. Once you have a team and you have draft capital attached to them, that's when they kind of lock in. So it's gonna be very interesting to see what changes between now and post draft.
Yeah, and that's why I'll bring up this question to you, Joe, because I'm curious, because it's something that every single fantasy league deals with. Is when do you like to hold your rookie drafts? Because I imagine a lot of people, some people do it before the draft, some people are doing it right now, other people do it a week after, right after, during. People get crazy with their rookie drafts because we've been waiting for this for so long. So when is the opportune time? What's the best time for a rookie draft in your opinion?
We talked about this a little bit yesterday. I did Mock It Like It's Hot with Ryan and Austin. I don't like doing it before the draft because you end up with things like Malik Willis going in the first round or equivalent of a first round pick. And then that pick just kind of tanks in value. Because you want to see what the league thinks of these guys. I don't want to go too early. Anytime after the draft is fine. When is too late? It doesn't matter. I would like to have it done like before July,
before spring camp. The rookie mini camp is probably where.
I mean, for someone like me who's in a lot of leagues, I'd like to space them out as much as I can. I don't want to get overloaded. So yeah, like June's a dead time in the league. So I think that's a good time to have your rookie drafts, but that may be my bias showing because it's kind of a dead time for me. It just gives you more time.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I think it's one of those questions that there's no right answer to. It's whatever your group decides on. But I'm always curious to hear people's take. Now, if we're looking at this board from a whole, the big glaring thing for me, at least, compared to past years, and it's what we expected, but no running backs in the first round, a few in the second, but then nothing until the back end of the third here. Not a ton of running backs going off the board, which again is what we expect with how this class is expected to go. And I will also say I was very disappointed that Marshawn Lloyd did not get to me, and I had to take Will Shipley. But either way, that's not the point. But I'm curious to see if you're a team in need of running back. Obviously, this is not the draft class for you, but do you have any favorites in these, the third and fourth rounds here? Because I know you haven't taken a running back, and I know you're quite the zero RB guy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like and a lot to not like about the guys in this class, right? They've all got warts, and this is why this is not an elite class. So I like, we've talked about Jalen Wright. I like him quite a bit. I've compared him to Aaron Jones. I think he's a very similar kind of player. But he tested so well, as kind of we talked about, we expected him to, that he's probably going to go in. I could see him going in the back half, like 11, 12 of your rookie drafts. I could see him getting into the first round if he gets a good landing spot, good draft capital. So I don't think he's someone I'm going to be able to get in like the third round, which is where I would prefer to take the running backs, because I think there's so many more good receivers than there are good running backs in this class. Braylon Allen, we've talked about, because I think he's got so much potential and he's just so crazy young. Yeah. Didn't test well at the combine, but just, I mean, like you said before, he's not going to be able to buy a beer until the playoffs of his rookie year, right? He's crazy young. So
whatever will he do?
All kinds of upside there. So yeah, there's a lot of guys I like. I like Marshawn Lloyd some. I like Blake Corum some. I like Estime some. It's just depending on where they go. Where do they land, and what's their opportunity? And again, this is why we're doing this, is to see how much this changes based on the landing spot in these cases, right? Is how much things are going to change based on where they go and what kind of capital they get.
Yeah, and I'll let you make this pick here, but it is one of those things. Oh, Johnny Wilson, interesting. I was considering it, but it is one of those things where certain people are going to fall and some people might go higher just because people love them more than others. And those flag pants are going to result in wildly different ADPs at times because, I think that's also something not to pigeonhole yourself into telling yourself you're going to be able to get someone here because you mocked them all that time. Because I've done every single year I do drafts in my dynasty leagues, and someone goes way before than I thought I would. And I thought I would be able to get him. And it really bothers me. Like Michael Pittman a few years ago. I was desperately trying to trade up for Michael Pittman. Couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden went off the board and I lost out on multiple years of a potential wide receiver one. So,
but there are some really good landing spots for these prospects, right? Like if Blake Corum goes to the Chargers with Harbaugh and Greg Roman,
he will lose his knees.
Amazing spot for him. Like he may. Dallas is basically wide open, right? That running back room is wide open. If they take a Braylon Allen, if they take a Benson, if they take a Marshawn Lloyd, like those guys could fall into just basically a full-time role. So like they're going to just shoot up the draft boards if they hit that spot. So yeah, I mean, there's somebody who could go in the third round here. Like, I don't think Bucky Irving's ever going to be a full-time back, but if he gets a spot where he's like the primary third down back, he could move up quite a bit. So, we didn't like the combine, but he was like the prospect going into the combine, had a really bad combine. If somebody still likes him and drafts him in late third, early fourth to be their primary third down back, he's going to shoot up this draft board. He's easily into the second round.
Yeah. And that's largely because of how, it's the lack of available upgrades at running back around him. So by default, he jumps up a whole round potentially, and he might jump past receivers that he shouldn't be because of the lack of depth at running back. So people want to get one that could be potentially usable and take an inferior prospect at the risk of not no disrespect to Bucky Irving, but if someone takes him over a first round receiver, you know what I mean? It's a questionable process. And we've seen that in past years as well. But I want to first off also thank everyone for drafting here. It was a blast, a little bit awesome to get through all these rookies and get through almost all of it without an auto draft. So I really appreciate you guys. And Jim also asking a good question, which I know you answered. You have an opinion on. If you're drafting now, do you lean toward receivers since we don't know landing spots? And I saw in the chat that you said you do.
Yeah, I would definitely draft for the positional value more than the player, right? Because players are going to go to good spots. Like look at Zach Charbonnet last year, right? He was going into the draft. He was like the clear RB3 behind Gibbs and Bijan.
Oh, RB3. Yeah. Sorry, Gibbs and Bijan. Yeah.
And then he gets decent draft capital, but goes to a spot where they've got another running back who was just drafted the year before, and his ceiling is to be able to split carries. all of a sudden he just takes a massive tumble down the board, and that's where you lose the value. So yeah, I'm going to take the positional value over the player. Like, it didn't change Zach Charbonnet's prospect profile at all. It just, he went to a bad situation, and that's what destroyed his value.
Yeah, and what a we like. It's one of those. It was one of those picks at the time where we had like, "What are you doing?" And a year later, we're still saying the same thing. What were you doing?
Exactly.
And it's so frustrating when it turns out that we were, the community was most likely right, because we're not getting paid to make those decisions. But we know anyway.
Like, NFL teams, they are, we want to put them on a pedestal and say they know what they're doing, but they have idiosyncrasies just like we do, right? They have, like, Pete Carroll likes having multiple backs in his running back room. That's how he wants to,
big boy too.
That's how he wants to operate. Yeah. So we need to understand that teams are not going to just optimize things. They have the ways that they want to do things. Like the Packers have very specific thresholds that they want to hit. So they may pass up better players to take, guys that meet their criteria. So we need to take that in consideration. And that's another reason why you don't want to draft before I don't want to draft before the draft, because like so much can change just based on how these teams view the prospects.
Yeah, and we just simply don't know everything. As much as I want to give
we don't know anything, really.
We just don't have access to everything.
Right.
It's why we see things like Malik Willis falling, or some people thought Kyron Williams would be a day 2 guy, and he fell to late day 3. Zach Evans being a top 3 running back on many pre-draft boards in February ended up being a late day 3 and a total afterthought for fantasy come draft day. So things change. I think a lot changes when we get that draft capital. But I agree with
Kendre Miller, who we both like Kendre Miller quite a bit, went to a very crowded running back room who just spent money on a free agent running back.
Yeah.
Obviously, the injuries played a big part in that, but where's the opportunity?
Yeah, and we're still waiting to see where that could be. I do like and then as we start turning our attention towards the mock draft a little bit here, the number one of the better values here that I honestly like, I like Isaac Guerendo out of Louisville. That 4th round pick there, that's somebody with elite athleticism. I don't want to say he reminds me of Isaiah Pacheco because his play style doesn't, but he has that similar type of breakaway speed and expected draft capital that he feels awfully similar. And when you pair him with that 4 round, that 4 picks that was that Bill's Mafia, right? Bill's Mafia fan made. I gotta say, I love it. Getting Neighbors, Ladd McConkey, Rowan Wilson as a Guerendo. No quarterbacks, which it's a stacked year. You might want to try to grab one, but it didn't fall to him really. He took Neighbors over Daniels. I won't blame anyone for doing that. And he didn't rush a Michael Penix pick like someone in our call here did. We can talk about Michael.
It's a 2nd round, man.
I know. I'm messing with you, but I'm not. I'm not the biggest Penix guy, but either way, yeah, I really like that group of picks that Bill's Mafia was able to come out with. What about you?
I think the Pacheco comp is good, right? Because he was a 7th round guy who didn't have great vision, but Guerendo's a better athlete than Pacheco was. So if he's probably going to be a late day 3 guy, but if he gets into a spot where like the seas parted for Pacheco, really, and well, it was a good spot because they really didn't have a bell cow running back because Kansas City doesn't want a bell cow running back, but like everything kind of fell into place for him, and he did enough in camp to earn the job, and then did enough with the job to keep the job, and now he's a full-on starting running back, whether you liked him as a prospect or not. I did not like him at all as a prospect, but he's got a job. He's on an elite offense. So, I think that's a really good comp, actually.
Yeah, and that's the landing spot stuff we were talking about, right? Of that 7th rounder lands anywhere else in the NFL, chances are we never see Pacheco, because people just aren't always willing to give a 7th rounder a chance. But Kansas City sees the value in getting the dirt cheap running back production, so they could help the rest of the roster. And obviously that's worked out pretty well for the Chiefs. But either way, Joel, start us off by talking about your group here. Starting off with a receiver in Rome Odunze passing on Jayden Daniels.
Yeah, so I'll say this: if I was in that situation in an actual draft, like I would try to package that pick and try to trade that pick with Jayden Daniels sitting on on the clock there, because I think I would probably be able to get a pretty good haul for it, because I think people are high enough on him as a prospect. Like I like Odunze as a prospect better than Daniels, so if forced to make the pick, I would take that pick. And especially, like I said, most of my teams have a quarterback room because I kind of prioritize that. So I would probably want Odunze more if I'm forced to make the pick. In that situation, I would probably try to aggressively move that pick because I think I can get a very good package for it. Penix, like I've said before, I think his floor is basically where Will Levis went last year, like kind of mid-30s overall, kind of early second. Whether somebody trades for, like, he could go in the first, like he could go to the Raiders, he could go top 15, like that's possible. Like Daniel Jeremiah at the combine said he thinks there's a big five, and he thinks he thought at the time that there would legitimately be 5 quarterbacks going in the top 15. I don't necessarily agree with that, but if a guy like that who's that plugged in thinks that that's possible, we have to pay attention to that, right? So in the second round, just getting a quarterback there, if he's a start, like he's going to be a starter if he gets drafted, because he's like what, 32? Not kidding. He played college for 6 years. He's got experience, so he's probably going to just step into a starting spot with Denver, Vegas, whatever. He's probably going to step in and be a starter. So if you can get that in the middle of the second, I think that's massive value. I took McMillan in the third. I like all the Washington receivers. I like McMillan. I like Jalen Polk. Obviously, I like Odunze. I think the league's going to like them too. So I think they're going to get good draft capital. And then Johnny Wilson, Josh gave me some crap yesterday for taking him.
Why not?
This is a total flyer. It's the fourth round
on a 6'7" freak.
Yeah, he's 6'7". He's kind of a wide receiver, tight end hybrid, but didn't have a good year in 23, but had a really good year in 22. There are teams that are going to look at, say, okay, this was really good in 22. I don't know what happened in 23. Maybe we can find a reason for it. Maybe he just had a bad year. But I think there's a lot of teams that would like to just put him in their offensive room and say, okay, what can we, like, this is a guy that you need to ignore what he can't do and look at what he can do. And if teams look at him like that, he could have a role somewhere.
Yeah, even if it's not, the fantasy role we might dream of, he easily fits on a team as a red zone machine. As a red zone profile where you throw him out there and you draw at least another person over because he's that big. You can't put someone undersized, so you have to put a big corner or a big safety on him, and that could draw away from another big target out wide.
He's valuable. Not that stylistically different than like a Darnell Washington, who Pittsburgh took.
Yes.
Like elite, huge size, elite blocker, but can run routes, can be a good receiver. So yeah, and maybe he gets converted to tight end, and now you've got, a guy who can be a red zone option at tight end in a non-tight end premium. That's what you're looking for, right? Guys who can score touchdowns. So it's a flyer. It's a flyer, but it's the fourth round. So
yeah,
I'll take that flyer.
And as you're the prominent Juwan Johnson guy, this makes all the more sense, right? You're a Juwan Johnson guy, right?
Sure. Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
As soon as Taysom Hill gets out of the way, he is ready for blast stuff.
Johnny Wilson is going to be a saint. Juwan Johnson being that's a lock.
That could happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'll ask you this because I'm gonna, as I go through my team. I took Keon Coleman in the first round. As you can see with my draft, potentially I'm quite the FSU fan of the talent they have out there, and I think Keon Coleman will get that second round capital. But I have Bo Nix higher than Penix. And honestly, when I was doing my breakdown of when I was watching some Troy Franklin film, I came away far more impressed with Bo Nix than I came away with impressed with Troy Franklin. And it's not an anti-Troy Franklin take necessarily. I just thought Bo Nix made every single throw. Like I watched a lot of Oregon this year. I really like Bo Nix. I understand that's quite the late breakout. I understand that it didn't work out at Auburn. And I understand that he's older because of the years it took. But I didn't see a throw that he wasn't asked to make, and his timing especially with Troy Franklin, because he was so much of that receiving offense, the timing was just near perfect. So I feel like if Bo Nix gets the right room, I see him as a someone who's ready to start from day one. And I'm so curious to see where he goes. Like I like him a lot more than I remember liking other day 2 quarterback prospects in the past.
He's not stylistically similar to Penix, but he's in a very similar situation, right? And that I expect him to be kind of drafted in that late first, early second round, and I expect him to be a starter wherever he goes on day one. So yeah, it's the same thing with Penix. If you're getting these guys in the mid to late second, I think that's huge value.
Yeah, I mean, the question is just how many starting spots are there, because we have to allocate one for Williams, one for May, one for Daniels, one for McCarthy, most likely. And then you still have the potential Penix and Knicks of, we have whoever Minnesota's going to roll out there, because honestly, it probably won't just be Sam Darnold. And you have Denver, who has Jarrett Stidham. You have, I guess, New England, who has no one. Jacoby Brissett, I guess. But it's there are a lot of spots, but I think there's also going to be, like, the Raiders are comfortable, I think, starting Gardner Minshew for the season and then running it back next year with whoever they want in their class. I think they would be comfortable doing that. But
are they comfortable doing that, or are they running a smoke screen so that they can get a Penix or they can get a Knicks in the early second?
I think
that's why I think you have to look at all these teams that signed like non-great guys to like be a bridge or 1 year starting quarterback, like Brissett, like you mentioned, like Sam Darnold, like Aiden.
Does Gardner Minshew belong in that tier?
Like, yes, he does. Those guys should not be starting in the league. So the way I look at that is these teams sign these guys in case the draft doesn't work out the way they want, but it also kind of said, well, it makes other teams say, well, they could start these guys, so maybe they're not actively looking for a quarterback, and then these guys fall, and then they kind of make their trades up, and then they go get them. So, yeah, I expect both these guys to be starting. I think Bo Nix and Michael Penix are both better than Aiden O'Connell. They're better than Jacoby Brissett. They're better than Sam Darnold. They're better than they're better.
Penix and Darnold are like the same age.
They're better than Stidham. They're better than Gardner Minshew. So yeah, I think these guys are going to find their way to jobs by the time September rolls around.
I'm gonna quickly fact check. Oh no, that's just not even close to. No. Okay, yeah. Darnold's 2 years older than Michael Penix, despite being 6 or 7 years in the league.
But, sounds about right.
Josh also adding in the chat, and a good thing to note as well. On no pun intended, on Wednesday, Chrissy Freud of A to Z Sports, also a big fan of Bo Nix, so she knows her stuff, and that's why you should definitely tune into Wednesday's show. I like Bo Nix, man. I love the underdog mentality of him being forgotten after Auburn and the disastrous situation in Auburn, but the whole downfall of Auburn in general, honestly. But either way, the rest of my class, because I got so obsessed with Bo Nix there, took Will Shipley. I think he's that guy that could carve out a third down role. To me, he screams rotational committee back, and there's value for that in the NFL. When I'm looking at later round running backs, and I would have rather got Marshawn Lloyd. When I'm looking at those later round guys, I want guys that I think can get on the field. I don't think Shipley will be, a bell cow at any point. I think that role is being phased out of the NFL, but Shipley screams somebody that will rotate in well and coaches will like. And the last pick I went with Jordan Travis. That if that man did not hurt his ankle, I would have had as a first round guy, because I have been in love with Jordan Travis for the last 2 years. But obviously he shattered his leg and ankle, and that's unfortunate. But that also leads him to be a fourth round guy where I can put him on the taxi squad. Hopefully he gets a chance when he gets healthy to compete, because he was absolutely perfect with FSU last year. I thought he made every single play. He was a clear leader of that team. I am such a big fan of Jordan Travis, but it's such a shame. It bothers me. Like, the only reason I might not draft him is because looking at his name upsets me.
Yeah, and I think he's probably a guy that you'll be able to acquire later. Like, I like Jordan Travis too. I'm on record as saying I think he'd be like the perfect guy for the Packers to take as a late round developmental quarterback, because you can just stash him on IR or pup, whatever. If you want to see, like, they drafted Sean Clifford last year. If you want to give him another year to see what he's got, you can put Travis on the taxi you can probably put on practice squad. He's probably going to be on IR, right? He's probably going to spend the year on IR. You can let him be part of the team for a year. You can let him learn the playbook for a year. You can let the guy you have play out the preseason, see what he's got. You see if there's another level that you want to keep him or not, and just keep Travis on IR, pup, whatever, and not spend a roster spot on him. So it's kind of perfect developmental guy. If you're not sure about your number 2 and you want to kind of look to the future, I think that's a really good pick. The only reason I would say maybe not draft him is I think if the team that drafts him gets into a roster crunch, like if you got a taxi squad, sure, throw him on there. But
I'm drafting with the expectation that my Dynasty league has a taxi squad.
If you're in a league that doesn't have a taxi squad that's kind of tight on roster spots, then I wouldn't draft him because he's probably shouldn't be rostered the first year. So he's going to be kind of a league specific guy, whether you should draft him or not.
Yeah. And that's why, I at the 109, at the 409, I take him, I stash him, and hopefully a year from now it pays off dividends, maybe even at the back end of next season where maybe you're hearing positive reports, even if we're not seeing it. But it's someone that the biggest knock for me against him was health, is just being able to be upright. And when that's my number one concern in the 4th round, I like that. I like taking shots on guys that I believe in the talent. I might not believe that they'll be able to get out there, but I believe in the talent. And that's what we've talked about with Isaiah Likely on the show for every other week for the last year of somebody that we like as a talent. We don't know when he gets out there, but when he does, he's good. And that's why we said in last summer to try to buy him, because it pays off when he's out there. And when I'm in rookie drafts, I always draft for talent. I don't always draft for everything else. Positional needs, we don't care about. I'm drafting best player available. For me, that was Jordan Travis. Even though Michael Pratt could have a better chance, Brendan Rice has the name value.
Speaking of Chrissy Freud, she loves Michael Pratt.
Yeah, a lot of people that is one of the more stronger niche groups of. I would say that's the strongest niche quarterback truther group of.
Yeah, he's a developmental guy, but like that's another guy I can see that like the Packers have talked about wanting to get back to drafting developmental quarterbacks, and like they've got a good history, like Matt Hasselbeck, Mark Brunell, Aaron Brooks. These are all guys they drafted who sat behind Brett Favre, and they traded for like pretty good, much better draft capital than they spent to take the pick. So they've kind of talked about wanting to get back to doing that. I can see Michael Pratt being a guy that they take as a developmental guy, sits on the roster for a couple of years, and then they, gets in some preseason games that other teams say, hey, this guy looks pretty good. And then you trade him for like a second or a third, something like that.
Now, the interesting thing about this whole group here that we're looking at, what stands out to you with how this draft fell? Because if I'm looking at it, we kind of see everything going how the draft order would have expected. We see Xavier Worthy going in the back of the 112, and I'll admit that I considered him at the 109 as well. Were there any surprises in this draft that you saw?
Not really. Like Worthy's a guy we saw on Twitter, the handshake with Mike McDaniel. Like if he goes to the Dolphins, I don't think that they should be spending that draft pick on another receiver, but you can make the case. Like, Tyreek Hill's got 2 years, and we want to develop a guy behind him and have that same guy that we can transition to. Like if he gets drafted to the Dolphins, he screams up draft boards. He's
the wide receiver at worst.
Yeah, exactly.
He goes to the Dolphins.
He may be into the 108, 109 territory. So again, I don't think that's going to happen, but I could see it. And if it does, that's a guy who goes way up. I like that base Brody team. He went all receivers, like we talked about. I like Leggett. Devontae Walker, had a bad Senior Bowl, but again, he's a guy that you can make an excuse for him, right? Because he had the transfer issue where he missed half the season because the NCAA wouldn't let him play when he was Kent State to North Carolina, whatever it was. So there's kind of he didn't get the full season to kind of work out the kinks like he really wanted to. So again, he's another guy. Getting him at the 312 is, man, I think that's really good value there. And Malik Washington's another guy who I think that the draft industrial complex kind of undervalues. So to get him at 412 is, I think that's really, so I think picking at the 112, like where you don't expect to have a good haul, I think that's a really good class coming out of that position.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice shotgun approach where I think he made the right calls because we saw the first 4 quarterbacks go off the board right before him. Those 4 guys that we are fairly confident will get first round draft capital. We don't know about Penix, we don't know about Nix, but we're not panicking and not jumping to the next quarterback of, hey, maybe Michael Penix, talking yourself into saying Penix or Nix will definitely get that back end first round value. When it's equally likely that, they could be high seconds, they could be late thirds. You never know. Maybe someone slips because of, so a lot of teams might write off Penix because of the age and injury history. Teams will not have him on his board because of that. People will not have Nix on the board because of how long it took him to do anything. But
because what they saw at Auburn went never
leave their mind because it was so horrifically bad. And the same concept goes for Spencer Rattler, who went in the 4th round. Somebody that was so horrifically bad and then somewhat turned it around, not as much as Bo Nix did, but and then getting him 2 rounds later. But not panic on any of that. Staying true to your board, getting your 4 receivers there. I definitely like that approach. I think it mitigates some risk as well of one of those 4 receivers, and obviously most likely one of the first 2 should pan out to be a actual option. And I like that as opposed to shotgunning it with lesser values just because you want to switch it up.
Right. Yeah. The other thing, the interesting pick, and I'm not sure if this was an auto or not, Joe Milton at 302.
I don't think it was.
That's okay. That's the definition of a developmental quarterback, but there's huge upside if he can be developed, right? If he goes to a team that's, if he goes to a quarterback whisperer team, man, I don't know if he has it inside him to ever be an NFL caliber starter, but man, he's an interesting cat, right? That arm is huge. But I would argue that's too early to take a guy like that at 302, but it's Javon Baker, who I really like at 402. So if you flop those 2, I'm perfectly happy with that draft.
And that speaks to the depth of this receiver class, right? Which is the number one thing we know is how deep this receiver group is. But I do agree with you. I would have much rather taken a Polk, a Wilson, even I would have rather taken Ricky Pearsall, even though I'm not as much of a fan as those other names. Just because those guys I feel confident getting day 2 capital versus Joe Milton, who is a guaranteed sit and watch type of prospect. There's no world that
they all have a better chance of hitting than Milton does, especially within the first couple of years when you're going to have to make it. Again, if you have a taxi squad and you can just throw him on there, fine. If you've got limited roster spots, he's probably not a guy you can carry.
Yeah, and that's another thing to point out as well, that I'm glad you bring that up as well with the taxi squads. Of Joe Milton is a more appealing pick, and the same thing with Jordan Travis, same thing with Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler. These guys are more better picks in leagues where you can taxi squad them for 2 years. Not every league does that. A lot of most of mine do 1 year. So then you kind of get to the end of the year. They didn't play because you weren't expecting them to. And then you got to make that roster crunch. And then you might have got rid of them. But it's hard to make
roster spots have value. Yeah, and that's the one thing you got to consider when you're going through these drafts. If you're in a league with a 30-man rosters, you just take whatever flyer you want. If you're in a league with 23-man rosters and 2 IR spots or something like that, and no taxi, you've really got to focus on guys who have an opportunity and you can carry throughout the year, because you can't waste the roster spot on a developmental guy that has no real chance of playing for 2 years.
Yeah, you just got to be smart about it. But Gator adding, before we get to a few do better trades as we always do, Gator adding a couple questions in here about the dart throw running backs in the last 3rd and 4th. You got the Bucky Irvings, the Marshawn Lloyd, the Will Shipleys, as we talked about before, Guerendo. Do any of those? This is where I want to take my shots on running back, because especially right now where we don't know where they're going to end up. So I'm significantly not going to be investing. I feel so uncomfortable taking a 2nd round running back, where a 2nd round rookie draft running back, when I don't know when they're going to be. In theory, if we're drafting right now, I'd be waiting until the third round because they could all go on day 3 and I wouldn't be totally shocked. But I mean, I would, but hyperbole. Your thoughts?
Yeah, like Marshawn Lloyd's a guy who's getting a lot of buzz, but I think there's some real flaws. And like he fumbles a lot. He's not a good pass blocker. So I think he's a guy, like he's a good runner, but I think there's some, like I said, there's some flaws that the NFL is not going to like about his game. So I could see him falling into day 3. So I don't think this is an inappropriate like draft spot for him in a mock. Guy I think is really interesting is Kamani Vidal, who went at 405. Like I could,
right before your
you
pick.
look at him. There's some muscle hamster in him, right? He reminds me so much of Doug Martin that he's good at everything. He's not a good pass blocker, but he's good out of the backfield. Really good runner. Really good. He's not big, but he's strong. Like he runs through tackles. You can see he's got that drive in his glutes, in his thighs. He can really get through. So not a big guy, but Doug Martin was a pretty valuable player for a couple of years. So I could see him being that kind of player. I think he's a really interesting guy. And we talked about Guerendo. Like Shipley and Irving, we talked about their third down backs, their pass catching backs, but those guys have value.
Yeah. And that was my basis when I talked about the Shipley pick before. It was just someone that I think can get on the field for third downs. And if injuries happen, he gets asked to do early down work as well. So there's a route to being on the field, and that's always what I'm looking for with these guys that are running backs. Gator adding, is there a player you're surprised didn't get drafted? Do you have any?
Not a player I'm surprised. The guy I had at the top of my queue was Dylan Laube, again another running back. Who I think small. Where do you go? New Hampshire, like real small school.
He went to New Hampshire. Yeah.
Yep. So he's a guy I think the league could like. I think the league could legitimately like him more than say a Bucky Irving. I think that's inside the realm of possibility. So I'm really surprised didn't get drafted. I think the receivers that like the Malik Washingtons and Javon Bakers that I think are going to fall to this range, they all got taken. So there's no way I'm really surprised didn't get taken.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is maybe a tight end, but again, it's such a down class of, maybe Ben Sinnott is somebody that I might expect to be drafted just based on draft capital, but I'm not in love with any of them. I'm not in love with any.
To me just looks like an H-back. Like he looks like Kyle Juszczyk. I don't think he's I don't think he's a very
No, I know.
I don't think he's a fantasy useful player. Maybe Jaheim Bell, but again, this wasn't a tight end premium, so those guys shouldn't get drafted. Right?
Yeah. That's what I agree with. It's
those
hard
flyer tight ends, you shouldn't be taking them in non-tight end premium.
Yeah, it's hard to pick players we're surprised about, honestly, in my opinion, when we don't have the draft capital, because all these guys can equally, like the guys that didn't get drafted here are equally likely to be day 3 flyers and undrafted, maybe priority signs. Like I guess I'd add young Frank Gore, little Frank Gore, maybe just because of the name value, and if he gets drafted somewhere in the 6th round, people will love him as a sleeper just because of that. Maybe I would love maybe that's someone I want to throw at the end of my bench, but and I think that also kind of covers who's the priority ad of. I guess I'll go after Frank Gore Jr. and try to whittle the headlines out of it. If anything, that kid's gonna work. We know the work ethic is in that family, so and in a lot of them. But either way, that kind of covers the mock draft here. I really want to thank everybody for tuning in for that as we jump over to some Do Better trade reviews, because excitingly enough, it's not just Joel who had a big trade this week, even though Joel did, and we're going to start with that. So we're going to jump into that in a second. But 12-team Superflex, starting 10, no tight end premium, giving Patrick Mahomes for Anthony Richardson and Sam LaPorta. No tight end premium. Interesting. Talk to me.
So, context, I have a loaded quarterback room in this league, right? I had Mahomes, I also have Kyler Murray, I have Brock Purdy, and I have Kirk Cousins. So I have a pretty stacked quarterback room. Any of those guys could start for me in any given week. This is a chance to, and it's a team that has a ton of quarterbacks, but really not a whole lot else. It's got like Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. There's just not a lot of high-end talent. So this is a chance for me to get off of Mahomes for someone I think, if he can stay healthy, like I can see Richardson becoming or moving into that top tier of quarterbacks with Mahomes and Allen and Hurts, and getting another piece that is a clear-cut starter for my team. I didn't have a startable tight end. But I'm mitigating the downside risk of Richardson because I have 3 other starting quarterbacks. So if the worst case happens and he, like what we saw in year 1, is what he is, and he's a guy who can't stay on the field, I'm still okay because I've still got 3 other starting quarterbacks. And obviously not having Mahomes is a big loss, but I at least got LaPorta out of it. And I'm not, my quarterback room isn't screwed if Richardson can't stay on the field.
Yeah, I might. I do my best not to make deals, especially in the offseason, deals based on where the rest of my roster is at. It's just the way I approach it because I perceive things, and then the NFL says, no. I have a deep running back room. No. They're all gone. They're all injured. They're all COVID. They have COVID. They're out for the season. So, and all, I think this is a deal that I am too scared to make, but you're correct in your process in doing it. My worry is just that I don't know if Anthony Richardson is going to be a long-term option. I don't know. Like I'm not locked into Anthony Richardson working out yet. And that's, while I like him, it's hard for me to give Mahomes for someone that I am not confident will be a long-term starter in a quarterback. You know what I mean? If this was even, I don't know. I'm trying to think about who else I would be more confident in, but it's someone that I understand why it would make the deal. It's a shot. It's a risk, but it's a high upside one that you're willing to, that you've already mitigated the damage that could come from it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I'm shooting for upside. If the upside of this hits, I've got another tier 1 quarterback, and I got a free Sam LaPorta. I got a difference position, even though it's not a tight end premium. He's still a positional difference maker. He's still an automatic starter, as opposed to like I think I had like Cole Kmet and Dalton Schultz in this league.
That's good added detail. Yeah,
guys, I'm never going to be happy starting. I feel like I'm losing that position if I'm starting those guys that week. So I get a positional upgrade. If the upside case on this hits, then I win. I get a free Sam LaPorta. If the downside hits, I get LaPorta, but I've also got that covered. So yeah, a situational trade. Like I see your point. Like this is not going to work for everyone. But
the more you talk,
this team situation, it works for me.
The more you talk, the more you talk me into it, because for everything you just said, getting just the words "free Sam LaPorta" is just it's music to my ears.
But like now, to get back to your point real quick, if my quarterback room was Patrick Mahomes and only Brock Purdy, there's no way I'd do this deal, right? Because the downside is way too, like, then I've got nothing and I'm kind of screwed in my quarterback room. So yeah, this was only because I had that depth of quarterbacks that I was able to do this. So again, not a trade that everyone can realistically do.
And it's also, it's a good lesson in there to, for the people with a stacked quarterback room, it's okay to shop Patrick Mahomes. We don't want to. None of us want to. Nobody wants to get rid of him. But when you can make significant upgrades on the rest of your roster, it could be worth doing and worth exploring instead of just letting that value, not be its peak value for your team. It's not always just taking the best player available. So you do have to build a roster at some point. And getting the tight end one for like quite a while probably in Sam LaPorta is a very good deal at that. Now, Joel, I've been jealous of you. I've been jealous because you've been putting out all these amazing trades and I have been unable to get any done. But this past week, I tried something. We tried something. We shot in the dark, and I gave up one of my guys. I gave up Kirk Cousins. I gave up Kirk Cousins, Tyler Boyd, the 406 for George Pickens, the 312, and a 2025 second. Now, I was able to whittle that 312 back out as that Mike Williams deal news was coming out that he was visiting with the Steelers. So I was like, hey, give me that 312 as well. But what do you think about this deal? Because I still don't feel super comfortable. I feel okay with it, but I'm very nervous about giving up a quarterback for as little as I did, in theory.
So, yeah, I mean, if we wheel down the non-important parts, like Tyler Boyd doesn't matter, the 406 doesn't matter, the 312 don't matter. Yeah. This is Cousins for Pickens and a second. which I think is fine, right? If you have the quarterback depth that you don't necessarily need Cousins, and you want to layer out your roster and get another potentially high end receiver, because I think Pickens is going to play well with whether it's Russ or whether it's Fields. I think this is a big improvement for him over Pickett, over the previous offensive scheme. No Deontay Johnson. He's going to be the focus of the passing offense. So I think he's got the potential to kind of move into that top 20, top 15, maybe. I could see that. I think he's got the potential to be kind of that tier of wide receiver. So yeah, if you've got the depth and can afford to move Cousins, I think this is a good deal.
Now the depth is questionable. I will say the depth is
agreed. I'm aware of this team, and
you are aware of this team. So for the people that aren't, it's Patrick Mahomes, Gardner Minshew, Jameis Winston, and Josh Dobbs. And Josh Dobbs I could probably let go of, and Aiden O'Connell. Don't forget him. But the upside being that I have the 107, 108, 112. And anyone in that league, including yourself, Joel, I am willing to move Tyreek Hill to get a quarterback. But that was kind of the idea I went into this with, which is kind of an inverse of what you were just saying with your deal of the situation I have. Yes, I am light at quarterback, and I'm risking that I have to go out and find another one, whether that's with the 107 or trading up in the rookie draft or trading a player for something. But because I think adding George Pickens deepens my wide receiver depth even more, where I have, like right now, I have to, listen, we're not in love with Tyler Lockett right now, but I have Tyler Lockett on the bench. I have Mike Williams on the bench. When those guys are healthy, they will carry some value. And that's in a, starting 2 flexes, 2 receivers, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, George Pickens. We're feeling good about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is me talking myself into it, if you can't tell, of me just making sure and validating my own take. But yeah, I'm hoping that 2025 second will pay dividends. At the very least, it'll be a nice trade piece that gains significant value in 2 months when it becomes officially next year's class. But it's certainly less than what I think most quarterbacks go for in Superflex, so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, I think it's fair value, right? Because like Pickens is probably going to go for a late first right now. I think that's his market. And I think Cousins is probably about the same, right? You're not getting much more than like the 110, 111 for Cousins. Even though I expect him to be extremely productive this year, he just has no dynasty value. He has no trade value really. Just because he is so old, you got the injury to consider. So yeah, I think this is, if you want to get off Pickens or off Cousins, I think this is a good way to do it. Again, in your situation, I wouldn't have done that because I wouldn't be comfortable not having that. But you've got the draft capital that you can go
live dangerously. Yes, that is the factor here. Yeah, I do have 3 first-round picks, none of which are high enough to land me, the top tier quarterbacks. But if, in theory, JJ McCarthy could fall to me if I want to go that route. Maybe we just did a mock where, in theory, Jayden Daniels would fall to me at the 107. Yeah. And I would love that because I'm higher on Jayden Daniels.
I think you're in a situation where you can look at the teams ahead of you and say, okay, which of these teams name quarterbacks, where are they going to fall? Can I package 107 and 108 to get up to 104 or whatever?
That's what I'm ready
and get myself a quarterback, knowing where they're going to, knowing what the landing spot in the draft capital is.
I've been taking some logo 3-pointers at getting Caleb Williams at the 101. It has not gone very well, but
hasn't panned out yet.
No, it has not. JJ adding that he likes the trade. He's not a big fan of Pickens, but overall values on my side. That was always the hope was because he's 35, coming off a torn Achilles. Like you said, Joel, fully expecting him to be great, but he is one of those guys that deeper down we know that if it goes wrong, his dynasty value plummets. If something goes wrong in the rehab and maybe he gets hurt again because he can't move quite properly, he gets hit again and he misses some time. This is now a 35, 36-year-old quarterback who will have one more guaranteed year after this one. And you're looking at, okay, he's a bridge. That's potentially what the thought is if something goes wrong this year.
If he goes out and Bijan Robinson has a couple multi-touchdown games and he only has like 1 touchdown and it looks like
I'll buy him
be a
back for the
run-centric
25
offense,
that I got.
yeah, his value tanks. So yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, so that's the process at least. But thank you all for tuning into this one. It's great. And Gator also bringing up an important point that I wanted to bring up for you guys, that make sure you check out Mocking with the Stars tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern, or you catch it after the fact. Either way, it'll be on the Club Fantasy FFL YouTube, because Hutchinson Brown, who I love, I talked to quite a bit, awesome kid, awesome, great content creator, is going to be on the show tomorrow. So be sure to tune into that and catch it afterwards as well. Watch 3 times. Right, Joel? You going to watch it 3 or 4 times?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's always something to learn. And like I said before, Gator and Chris do a great job. It's a really good show. So looking forward to Hutch tomorrow night, and should be good stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to pop that one on. We're going to put some popcorn on. We'll get, it'll be an experience. It'll be an experience. And I hope to see all you guys in the chat there, because Gator deserves all those eyes watching his great content, as well as Hutch's great content, because it's good to see.
His drafts fill really early too. So if you want to get in with those guys, you got to get in quick, because those drafts fill early.
Yeah, and a good way to do that, check out Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter, YouTube, all the good stuff, especially on YouTube. Would love to see more subscribers on there. Or not more subscribers, just seeing any subscribers on there, because we always love to see it. That's the best way to support us right now, and that's really, we love doing this for you guys, and it's awesome to see when we get that subscriber ticking up as well. So thank you all for joining into this episode of the Dynasty After Party. We'll be back. Well, next week's Easter, Joel. So we're trying to figure out if we do a little holiday special. Either way, something to stay tuned for. Again, by social media, because we're not going to be doing it on Easter, but we might do it a different day, right, Joel?
We have a little Good Friday special.
Maybe a little Good Friday special, a little Good Friday. Good. We'll talk about it. We'll either way, all the more reason to follow Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter, because that's where all the updates will come through. Or feel free to follow ourselves here. You follow Joel here at the Joel Wirth. You follow myself at Michael__Sicoli. It's too late to get the one with 1 underscore, but appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Remember, Dynasty is like a disco ball, keeps on spinning year round. So join the club almost every Sunday, because it won't be next Sunday because of Easter, but every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern here at Club Fantasy FFL. So stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you all for tuning in.